Hi, I'm Khalib, and welcome to my YouTube channel, Wild West Tales of Law. Let's begin the story.
The stagecoach stopped so hard the whole body of it shuddered, and Lainey Wilder grabbed the window frame to keep from being thrown forward. Dust rose around the wheels and drifted across the little Wyoming town like smoke. She pressed her gloved hand to the glass and looked out at Red Rock, the place she had crossed half the country to reach. It was smaller than she imagined. A few weather-beaten buildings leaned into the wind. A hotel with peeling paint. A general store with crooked boards. A church steeple in the distance. The sky was low and gray, and the cold had a sharp bite to it that slipped through every crack in the coach. "End of the line, miss," the driver called. Lainey took a breath, gathered her skirt, and climbed down. Her boots touched the street, and she straightened without thinking, standing as she always did, fully upright. Heads turned at once. They always did. A man by the hitching post looked up, then looked up farther. A woman carrying a basket slowed and stared. Lainey felt the old heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her chin steady. She had not come 2,000 miles to fold herself in half for strangers. She turned to the driver. "I'm looking for Harold Boone's ranch." The driver scratched his beard. "Boone's place is north of town. He usually comes in when he's expecting somebody." He glanced at her carpetbag and then at her face. "He expecting you?" "Yes," Lainey said, though the word came out thinner than she meant it to. 6 months of letters sat tied in blue ribbon inside her bag. 6 months of careful handwriting and promises. A partner, he had written, a woman with grit, a fresh start, a life built on honest work instead of city gossip. He had asked about her temper, her cooking, whether she feared hard winters. He had never asked her height. She had never told him. The hotel clerk knew who she was before she finished asking. "The lady from back east," he said, looking over his ledger. "Boone was here earlier. Left in a hurry. Did he say he'd return?" The clerk gave a small shrug that was not really a shrug. "Didn't say." Looked bothered, though. Lainey stood very still, bothered. Quote, "Just what I saw, miss." Outside, the coach had already rolled away. Its wheels faded down the road, leaving her with one carpet bag, a trunk still at the depot, and $17 hidden in her glove lining. Not enough for many mistakes. She waited on a bench by the hotel door while the light thinned and the cold deepened. People passed and pretended not to look. A pair of boys slowed, just to whisper. A woman at the mercantile stopped sweeping long enough to stare openly, then swept harder when Lainey met her eyes. By the time Harold Boone rode in, the sun was dropping behind the hills. Lainey stood so quickly her knees shook. She knew him from the photograph he had sent. Dark hair, broad shoulders, clean jaw. He looked solid, dependable, exactly like the man she had built in her mind from his letters. He saw her. His horse slowed, then stopped. He dismounted and walked toward her with the careful look of a man approaching something dangerous. Lainey lifted her hand in greeting, but his face changed before he reached her. Surprise first, then confusion, then a hard, pinched disappointment that made her stomach drop. "Miss Wilder," he said. "Mr. Boone." She tried to smile. "I'm glad to finally meet you." His eyes moved over her from hat to boots. "You're tall." The words hit harder than if he had shouted. Lainey lowered her hand. "Yes." He circled once, as if he were checking a horse he might buy. "You didn't mention it." "You didn't ask." His jaw tightened. A man expects certain things. What things? He gestured at the air somewhere near his shoulder. A wife ought to look like a wife. Delicate, proper, not. He stopped. "Not what?" Lainey asked quietly. He exhaled hard through his nose. "This won't work." The street seemed to go silent around them. Lainey heard every word that followed, as if from far away. He said he needed a woman who fit in. He said people would laugh. He said church socials would be impossible. He said he wanted a partner in spirit, yes, but not someone who towered over him and made him look foolish. Then he said the worst part. "You're not what I ordered." Quote, Lainey felt something in her chest go cold and hard. "Ordered?" Harold shifted, annoyed now, as if she were making this difficult. "You know what I mean. I wrote for a wife. I was clear about what kind of woman I needed. A woman or a decoration?" His face darkened. "Don't twist things." "I'm trying to be honest." He mounted again before she could answer. "Stage comes through in 3 days. Best take it. Go back where you came from." Then he rode away. He did not look back. Lainey stood in the middle of the street while curtains moved in windows up and down the block. She could feel the town watching. The too tall woman from New York. The one who came for a husband and got turned away before supper. The wind cut through her coat. She picked up her carpet bag and walked. Not to the hotel, not back to the bench, anywhere but there. At the edge of town, she found a small church with a leaning door and broken glass in one window. It looked abandoned. The paint was peeling. One step sagged under her weight. She pushed the door open and slipped inside. Cold air lived in the place, but at least the walls blocked the wind. Lainey sat in the front pew and held her bag in both hands. The room smelled like dust and old wood. Fading light stretched across the floorboards. Somewhere in town, a dog barked, and then all she heard was the wind and her own breathing. She did not cry. She had spent too many years learning that tears never changed what people saw when they looked at her. Too tall, too much, too visible. Darkness settled slowly. The church grew colder. Lainey pulled her coat tighter and tried not to think about the next 3 days, or the money in her glove, or what kind of woman crossed 2,000 miles just to be told she took up too much space. At last she heard footsteps on the church steps, slow, heavy, certain. Lainey stiffened and turned toward the door as it opened on a blast of night air. A man stepped inside, broad-shouldered and wrapped in a worn sheepskin coat. For a moment he was only a shape against the moonlight. Then he moved forward, and Lainey's breath caught. He was taller than she was. He looked at her once, taking in the carpet bag, the dark church, the way she sat straight even now. "Cold place to spend the night," he said, his voice low and calm. Lainey lifted her chin. "I'm not bothering anyone." He closed the door behind him and the wind dropped away. "Didn't say you were." He studied the broken window, the frost gathering on the inside wall, then looked back at her. "Question is," he said, "are you fixing to freeze here out of pride, or are you willing to come somewhere warm and hate me for helping?" Lainey stared at him in the dim church light, unsure if she had heard him right. The stranger stood a few steps inside the door, hat still on, cold, clinging to his coat. He did not move closer. He did not smile like a man trying to charm her. He only waited, as if her answer mattered, and he had no wish to force it. "Who are you?" she asked. "Colt Mercer." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it did. Plain, no show. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal flask. "Coffee," he said. "Not whiskey." Lainey hesitated, then took it. The metal was warm against her glove. She unscrewed the lid and drank. The coffee was bitter and strong, but it spread heat through her chest so fast her eyes stung. "Thank you," she whispered. Colt nodded once. "I heard what happened in town." Of course he had. In a place this small, shame traveled faster than weather. Lainey handed the flask back. "Then you know I'll be gone in 3 days." "Maybe." He glanced toward the broken window where wind hissed through the crack. "But 3 days is a long time to sit in a dead church." Quote, "I can pay for the hotel. You can pay for a bed while every clerk and cook and busybody in town studies you over supper." His gaze came back to her face. "Or you can come to my place, get warm, eat, and make your next move with a clear head." Lainey stiffened. "I don't know you." "That's fair. I don't go home with strange men." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Most women don't say it quite that direct. Most women are shorter and colder and have fewer choices." That brought the faintest look of approval to his face. True enough. He stepped aside and opened the church door again. Snow had started, small, hard flakes blowing sideways in the moonlight. "Offer stands," he said. "I've got a wagon outside. Fire in the hearth. Cornbread left from yesterday. You can sleep with the door barred if that makes you feel easier. If not, I'll leave you another flask and be on my way." Laney looked past him and saw the outline of a wagon, a horse, and a gray old dog sitting in the snow like a guard. Everything in her old life told her to refuse. A woman alone did not go with a man she did not know. A proper woman cared what people said. A proper woman held to appearances, even if she froze for them. But proper had brought her to a church bench with numb fingers and nowhere to go. She stood, knees stiff from the cold. "If I come," she said, "it is for one night." "Fine. And I pay my way, if that helps you sleep. And if you try anything, I won't." He said it so simply she believed him before she meant to. Laney picked up her carpetbag and walked toward the door. Colt took it from her without asking and carried it as if it weighed nothing. Outside, he helped her into the wagon bed where he had laid horse blankets over hay. The old dog came to sniff her gloved hand, then wagged once. "That's Blue," Colt said. "He likes you. Does he know me already?" "Blue's a better judge than most people." Colt climbed to the front seat and flicked the reins. The wagon rolled out of town while snow drifted across the road. Laney sat wrapped in blankets, watching the lights of Red Rock fade behind them. No one called after her. No one stopped them. Just dark land and white sky and the steady creak of wheels. The cabin appeared out of the storm like it had been waiting. It was small, built of gray logs with smoke rising from a stone chimney. A lantern glowed near the door. Blue jumped down first and trotted to the porch, tail moving in slow, pleased swishes. "Go on in," Colt said, unhitching the horse. Doors unlocked. Laney pushed it open and stopped. Warmth hit her all at once, rich and real, carrying the smell of wood smoke and coffee and old leather. A fire burned in the hearth. The room was one open space with a table, 2 chairs, shelves, a stove, and stacks of books everywhere. More books than she had ever seen in a ranch house, maybe more than in some city parlors. She set down her bag slowly, still half expecting the warmth to vanish like a trick. Colt came in with more wood under one arm and fed the fire. "Coffee first," he said, "then food." Laney sat at the table because her legs were shaking. Blue settled by her boots as if she belonged there. Colt moved around the stove with quiet ease. Not the clumsy show of a man trying to impress a woman, but the practiced motions of someone used to doing for himself. He cut thick slices of cornbread, poured coffee into 2 mugs, and set one in front of her. She drank and nearly moaned at the heat. "When did you last eat?" he asked. Laney frowned, counting backward. "Yesterday morning." He slid the plate closer. "Eat." She did. The cornbread was coarse and a little dry, and the best thing she had tasted in days. Colt said nothing while she ate, only drank his coffee and watched the fire. The quiet in the cabin was not the sharp, awkward quiet she knew from parlors. It was restful, room enough to breathe in. After a while, Laney looked around again at the books. "You read all of these?" "Most." "What for?" His eyes moved to the shelves. "Winter's long. Mind needs work, same as hands." She was not sure why that answer touched her, but it did. When she finished, Colt stood and crossed to the far corner where a curtain hung from the ceiling. "Bed's back there. I'll sleep in the barn." Laney looked up sharply. "No." "No? I won't take your bed." "You will tonight." His voice stayed calm. "Barn's warmer than that church, and I've slept there plenty. You need the fire more than I do." Before she could argue again, he pulled open a chest and handed her folded blankets and a clean nightshirt so large she almost laughed. "There's a wash basin there," he said. "Bar for the door is beside the frame if you want it." Laney stood slowly, holding the nightshirt. "Why are you doing this?" Quote. Colt paused at the door, one hand on his coat. For the first time, something shifted in his face. Not pity, something older, sadder. "My mother was near 6 feet," he said. "Whole town spent 20 years telling her to bend lower, speak softer, take up less room. She did. It broke something in her before she ever got sick." He looked at Laney fully then, and his voice went quiet. "When I saw you in that church, freezing cold and still sitting straight as a fence post. I figured the world had asked you to shrink enough already. Quote. Laney could not speak. Colt opened the door. Snow blew in around his boots. "Sleep," he said. "Morning's easier after a warm night." Then he stepped out and shut the door behind him. Laney stood in the firelight for a long time, the big nightshirt in her hands, listening to the wind and Blue's soft breathing and the strange, steady beat of hope returning where shame had been. No man in her life had ever looked at her height and called it something worth protecting. She barred the door, banked the fire like he told her, and slipped into bed with Blue on the rug beside her. The mattress was rough, the quilt smelled like cedar and smoke, and it felt like the safest place she had ever slept. Just before her eyes closed, she heard the barn door open and shut in the storm outside and knew Colt Mercer was bedding down in hay so she could be warm. For the first time since Harold Boone rode away, Laney let herself cry, not from hurt. From relief, morning came with the sound of an axe striking wood. Laney woke in Colt's bed, warm under heavy quilts, and for one confused moment she thought she had dreamed the whole thing. Then Blue lifted his gray head from the rug and thumped his tail, and she remembered the church, the wagon, the fire, the quiet man who had given her shelter. She dressed quickly and stepped into the main room. A pot of coffee waited on the stove. Beside it sat a plate of biscuits and a short note in neat, careful writing. "Eat first. I went for your trunk. Back by noon. Colt." Laney read the note twice. No man had ever left her a kind instruction without a hidden demand inside it. This one was only practical. She ate, washed the plate, and then stood in the middle of the cabin looking around at the stacks of books, the mending basket by the wall, and the tools hanging straight and clean near the door. By the time Colt returned with her trunk in the wagon, she was scrubbing his table. He stepped inside, snow on his shoulders, and stopped. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Laney said. "I need to." Quote, he studied her a moment, then nodded toward the books. "If you need work for your hands, those shelves have needed sorting for years." So that was how it began. He hauled wood and fed stock while she put his books in order and mended shirts from a basket so full she laughed when she found the bottom. At night, they drank coffee by the fire and talked in pieces, not long speeches, just truth given a little at a time. He told her about California and a father who wanted him in business. She told him about New York rooms where people smiled while asking her to stoop for photographs. He never asked her to be less. On the third day, Harold Boone rode out to the cabin. Laney opened the door before Colt could reach it. Harold stood in the yard with his hat in his hands and anger in his face. "I came to do right," he said. "People are talking. Come to town and I'll marry you." Quiet and fast. Laney stared at him. "You rejected me in the street." "I changed my mind." "No," she said. "You changed your fear." Harold's face went hard. "You'd rather stay here and be his woman than my wife." Blue lunged forward with a growl so deep it made Harold jump back. Colt stepped onto the porch then, silent and broad-shouldered, and Harold's eyes flicked between them. "Leave," Colt said. Harold pointed at Laney. "When this ruins you, do not come asking favors." Laney lifted her chin. "I would rather be ruined than small." Harold rode off cursing, and the yard went quiet again. Colt looked at her, one dark brow raised. "You all right?" "No," she said honestly, "but I am done being afraid of him." He nodded once, and that nod felt like respect. The town did not soften quickly, but winter has a way of making people practical. Sarah Winters came first with a basket of torn clothes and 5 children's shirts that needed patching. She stayed for coffee. Then Mrs. Palmer came with a dress hem. Then another woman. Then 2 more. Laney's hands were busy from dawn to dark. Colt cleared out the lean-to by the cabin and built her a proper workspace with a window for light and a table high enough that she did not have to bend. He built it to fit her. When she saw that, she had to turn away so he would not see tears in her eyes. "It's just a workroom," he said. "It's the first room anyone ever made for me," she whispered. His face changed at that, softening in a way she was learning meant she had reached the tender places he kept hidden. By Christmas, half the town had worn her stitches, even some who still whispered. Colt took her to the dance in the church hall, and when the talking started, he asked her to dance in the middle of the room where everyone could see. He was terrible at it. She laughed for the first time in weeks, and he grinned, and that was when she knew the danger had changed. She was no longer afraid of Red Rock. She was afraid of needing him. The trouble came 2 nights later. Tom Winters pounded on the cabin door after dark, breathless and red-cheeked from the cold. "Harold's stirring people up. Says you two are living in sin and he wants a town meeting at the church. Preachers with him." Lainey's stomach dropped. "I can leave tonight," she said at once, "before this hurts you more." Quote, Colt turned to her so fast, the firelight caught in his eyes. "No, they'll drag your name through the mud." "Let them drag." His voice was quiet, but hard. "You do not run because a bitter man lies loud." The church was packed the next night. Harold stood by the pulpit, proud as a rooster, with the preacher and his wife beside him. He talked about morality and decency and improper behavior. He talked about Lainey living under Colt's roof. He waved papers and called them witness statements. Then Sarah Winters stood and asked if mending shirts was a sin now. The room broke into nervous laughter. Harold pushed harder. "I have men who saw them through the windows." Colt stepped forward. "You mean Jim Hawkins, who got caught spying at Widow Carson's place last summer?" That brought louder laughter and a few red faces. Lainey stood when Mrs. Pritchard hissed that she was too bold. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. "You want to know what kind of woman I am?" she said, facing the room. "I am the kind who crossed 2,000 miles because I believed a man's promise. I am the kind he rejected because I am tall. I am the kind another man gave shelter to in a snowstorm when this town gave me stairs. I sew your clothes. I worked for every coin I have earned here. If that shames you, the shame is not mine." No one spoke for a long moment. Then old Mrs. Chen rose slowly and said, "Bible says feed the stranger. It does not say measure her height first." That ended it, not cleanly, not all at once. But the room changed. Judge Morton called Harold a liar to his face. Mrs. Palmer stood with Lainey. Sarah moved to her side. People left in clumps, muttering, but the worst of it had cracked. Outside in the snow, Colt helped Lainey into the wagon. "You were brave," he said. I was angry. Same thing sometimes. She looked at him in the moonlight, at the man who had stood beside her in front of the whole town and never once asked her to lower her voice. "Why do you keep doing this for me?" Colt's hands tightened on the reins. "Because you matter to me." He did not say more, and she did not ask. The words sat between them all the way home, bright and frightening. The answer came a week later at the frozen stream. Colt was checking fences when the ice broke under him. Duke came home without a rider, wild-eyed and lathered, and Lainey knew before she even grabbed her coat. She followed the horse and found Colt half in the black water, blood on his temple, skin pale as the snow. For one terrible second she could not move. Then she moved like fire. She dragged him clear. She got him over the horse. She hauled him into the cabin and stripped off his frozen coat with shaking hands. She built the fire high, wrapped him in blankets, packed warm stones around him, and sat on the floor beside him through the long night, listening to every breath. Near midnight, his eyes opened. "Lainey," he whispered. She bent over him, crying openly now. "You stubborn man, you nearly died." His cold hand searched for hers. "Thought I might." "Do not speak." "Need to." His voice was weak, but there was iron under it. "At the church, when Harold said I loved you." Colt swallowed hard. He was right. Lainey froze. "I tried not to," he said, each word slow. "Told myself I was helping you, that was all. Then you filled my house with light and work and noise. You made this place feel alive. Tonight in that water, all I could think was I might leave without saying what's true." His fingers tightened around hers. "I love you, Lainey Wilder." Not because you need saving. Because you stand tall and say what you mean, and take up your space like you were made to. Because you are the best thing that ever came through my door." Laney pressed his hand to her cheek and laughed through tears. "You foolish cowboy. I have loved you since the first night you offered me coffee in a dead church." His smile was faint but real. That long. That long. By spring, the scar on his head had faded, and the town had mostly found other things to talk about. Not all of them. Some people never stop. But Laney had work, friends, and a place in Red Rock now, and Colt stopped caring who watched when he took her hand in public. The proposal came on a bright morning in the sewing room he built for her. He stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, looking more nervous than he had looked facing Harold Boone. "I had a speech," he said. "It was better on horseback." Laney set down her needle, smiling. "Try the short version." He crossed the room and opened his palm. A simple gold ring lay there with a small blue stone. "My grandmother's," he said. "She was tall, too. My granddad loved her exactly as she was. I figured I should follow a good example." Laney's throat tightened. Colt took a breath. "Marry me. Build this place with me. Fight winters with me. Drink bad coffee with me when we're old." Laney laughed and cried at once, holding out her hand. "Yes, to all of it. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit like it had been waiting. That night they went to the social together. People saw the ring. Some cheered. Sarah Winters cried and hugged Laney so hard she nearly lost breath. Judge Morton shook Colt's hand. Mrs. Palmer kissed Laney's cheek. Even Harold Boone came near them at last, hat low and voice stiff. "I was wrong," he said, looking at the floor. "About you!" "About all of it." Laney studied him for a moment, then nodded once. "Yes, you were." He left, and that was enough. Later, Colt led her outside into the cool spring night, while music spilled through the church windows behind them. The stars over Wyoming looked close enough to touch. Laney leaned into him and looked out across the dark land that had once scared her. The first night in Red Rock, she had sat in a broken church and feared she would always be too much for any place in the world. Now Colt's arm was around her, steady and warm, and his voice was in her ear. "You all right, sweetheart?" Laney smiled up at him. For once in her life, she did not have to make herself smaller to be loved. She stood tall, took his hand, and answered the truth. "I'm home."